I just want to start off with a question, and then maybe you might have one, and then we'll get some questions from the audience. I just have to say, how difficult as a sports fan is it to hold the mirror up to this institution that you love? I mean, did you hesitate to make this film for that reason?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if it was hesitation. I think that in part because it was so disturbing to be reading about the what was going on in this area of looking at concussions over the last several years. It was so disturbing to read that, and there was a big part of me as a sports fan and as someone who's been into sports my whole life, who really hoped, and I still hope, that we're overstating it all. That we were just getting, almost, maybe there was almost a hysteria about this issue, and we really needed to learn more before we get too carried away. And that was part of the motivation for wanting to do the film, was to really, once I read Chris's book, Head Games, was to do a film that really told the story of how it became a public health issue, but also to make it a film that was an investigation for me and hopefully for the audience of kind of what do we know, what do we don't know, and what are the things that we still need to learn, and what do we do as parents of amateur athletes, about this issue now when our knowledge is so incomplete.
Yeah, there's so much denial in the movie. I was a little bit surprised, actually. I don't have kids, so I can't relate personally, but just so much denial with parents. It's just an institution. There's just so much tradition wrapped up in culture, and not to mention money. But yeah, it's tough to see. I can tell it's going to be difficult to turn the tide, and I don't know how it's done, but it raised so many questions. So I would want to ask you, Ron, because there's a question in the film just about the importance of youth sports, and you can't just take it away. I mean, it would leave such a gap. So when did you start playing football?
I started playing football at the age of 5.
Oh my.
So I've been playing football 40-some plus years.
Yeah. So if you hadn't been playing football when you were a teenager, what would you have been doing? I mean, what would your life have been like?
I don't really know, because football was my life. It was, the thing that everybody did in our community, and we ran around and hit each other. I boxed, I did karate, and I was one of those kids that wanted to be a gladiator. I was a little kid, but I always loved the contact, and that was what I was known for, the little kid that would hit you.
When we were growing up, it seemed like everything was safe. It was before they declared everything dangerous, right?
True.
Well, do you have any questions for Steve? I'd like to get some questions from the audience.
Well, just one question. When you got the pushback from the guys in the NFL, because I can remember having concussions many times, but it went totally undiagnosed. I was given an aspirin over on the sideline, and a few plays later, I was feeling a little bit better, and I went back out there because the coaches would say, tough it up. And so how did that make you feel when you knew without a doubt that you was going to get a pushback from this great big institution like we're going to get?
Yeah, well, it's not surprising. I mean, you know it obviously way better than me as someone who played in the NFL and played football your whole life. But it's in one way you can understand why the NFL did their best to kind of keep this under wraps for so long, and it was inexcusable. But you can understand from a business standpoint, a multi-billion-dollar industry, why they might do that. I think they're in a tough spot now, too, because there is a lot more awareness. They've taken a public posture of really trying to now care about this issue. But it's still hard because it is still football. And I think that, when you talk to guys in the league, and guys who are playing now don't want to be interviewed about this. But when you do talk to them, or talk to Chris, who's talked to a lot of them, the guys will say, it's like, if I report every time I see stars, even now, I'm going to get a reputation for being soft, being concussion prone, and if you're not, a star wide receiver or a star quarterback, then they're going to find someone to replace you. And for a lot of these guys, right? They come from tough backgrounds, and they don't. I don't think they perceive themselves as having a lot of alternative ways to make a great living. Certainly not a living on par with playing in the NFL. And so that's got to be a very tough decision to make if you're a player in that situation.
It is.
Questions from the audience? If you have a question, could you just kind of come up and stand? I'll give you the mic and you can stand in the camera. Frank, come on up. Okay. You're not shy.
Not at all, not at all. Yeah, first, I know the athletic director. You didn't show his face. Can you at least tell us his name so we can find his picture online and flip him off? Oh, I was angry. But
Yeah, I had to talk him into letting us just use his voice,
okay.
which was interesting. But he consented. So there you go. That was the best I could do.
and his name was what?
I can't tell you.
All right. Never hurts to ask. Okay, there was a story on Brian Gumbel's show last year about the Canadian Football League and how ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, is becoming prevalent, I guess, with them because they don't use the same pads that we do, that kind of thing. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things I really discovered in doing the film is that, because, when I came to this film with this question of, gee, if it's as bad as it looks like it could be, then why don't we have 150 guys, ex-NFL players, having committed suicide? Or why isn't everyone seemingly suffering from the same kind of things we're reading about when an Andre Waters commits suicide, or Terry Long, or one of those guys, Dave Duerson? But one of the things I discovered in doing the film is that it does seem to be, CTE does seem to be a disease that's been hiding in the shadows for lack of awareness. And it does have symptoms of ALS. It has symptoms of dementia, Alzheimer's. They think even symptoms of Parkinson's. Muhammad Ali is sort of the poster child for Parkinson's disease from, pugilistica dementia. But a lot of people in the scientific community believe that if he donates his brain to science, when they look at his brain, they may see that a lot of the damage is due, exclusively to CTE and really isn't even Parkinson's. So it's one of these diseases that's been kind of hiding in the shadows, I think, for a long time, and I think we're going to increasingly find that it is interrelated to a lot of other diseases that athletes have been suffering from, perhaps prematurely.
Can you come up, please? We have a young man coming up. Just stand right here so we can see you.
I was wondering, since in your video you didn't say anything about basketball, like concussions in basketball, does that still affect, like, concussions still happening?
Sure. Well, you can get concussions from any sport, really. Maybe not chess, unless the guy reaches across the table and knocks your head on the the board. But you can get concussions from just about any sport. But I think and basketball certainly. You see a video clip near the beginning where a guy falls on his head going to the basket. We didn't focus on basketball because basketball, like a number of other sports, is not considered a high concussion risk generally. And so we try to focus on the sports, some of the sports that are the most at high risk. But I think it raises one of those questions that I think every athlete and every parent struggles with, which is there's always some risk in just about any sport and even in regular life, and it's really just trying to figure out what amount of risk you're willing to tolerate and what kinds of things can be done in the truly contact sports like football and hockey that to kind of at least minimize the risk, even though there's a sort of understanding going in that you're going to get hit.
Yes. Come on up, Dave.
I see in the hockey league that the referees don't stop fights.
Right.
Is there any chance, this is not sport,
No.
and is there any chance, and it does not add to the contest, is there any chance that, or is there any movement at all toward the referees stopping fights? Because in other sports you will be evicted
Sure.
for that kind of thing. So in that sport in particular, it just fosters more brain damage.
Absolutely.
So what is the directionality at that point?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I know it's funny because if you look at old footage from the NFL, sorry, that's my phone going off. But if you look at old footage from the NFL, and I'm not talking about like the way back days, but if you look at footage from even 20 years ago and 20 years ago in basketball, you'd be amazed at how much fighting went on in those sports too. And this was before both those leagues really cracked down in a big time way, and they have. And so it starts at the league level. And in hockey, it's not only tolerated, it's encouraged. I mean, you know, it's considered part of the spectacle and appeal of the sport. And I've had people in the NHL tell me privately that the fear that the NHL has about banning hockey, banning fighting, is that they think it's going to completely alienate, in particular, the Canadian fans. Which is funny as an American because we think of Canada as being this very non-violent country. But when it comes to hockey, fighting is extremely ingrained in the sport there. And so they worry that they'll alienate the Canadian fan base. But this very same person that told me this said that he really believes that if they banned it, there would be an outcry for a little while and then it wouldn't matter because Canadians love hockey and they're not going to abandon the sport over not being able to see fighting. And I don't want to lay it all on the Canadians because clearly American fans like to watch fights too. But, you know, I think the National Hockey League is looking for a way to try to get out of the fighting, but they're trying to figure out a way to do it that's not going to alienate their fan base, and they're just going to have to alienate their fan base and do it because it really is inexcusable.
Anyone have a question? Can you come up, please? Yeah, come on up.
Hi there. Thank you so much for including the female soccer player. As someone who grew up playing soccer, it was so surprising to me to see that if you saw stars, that was concussion, because I can't count how many times that was my own experience even at the high school level. Thinking about that though, what other parts of the story did you have to edit out just because of the amount of content you had that you would have liked to have included?
Oh God, yeah, there's so much. I mean, really, this is a topic that, you know, well, books have been written on it, and certainly for film, you could easily do a multi-part miniseries and really to be as comprehensive as I think I would love to have been. But, you know, we try to do a film and keep it within a 90-minute format and cover as much ground as we could, and that's always a challenge. So yeah, I mean, a lot of things got left out. I mean, I would have loved to have gone and been able to spend some time with Cindy Parlow and see her with her team and see some of the ways in which she is really trying to incorporate her own current thinking now with her own players. Isaiah Kazavinsky, Chris's roommate from Harvard and a linebacker, there was a lot more in his story I would have loved to have told as well, because he, you know, this was a guy that when Chris was writing the book, he absolutely didn't want to see the book because he was worried that if he read Chris's book, it would make him second guess what he was doing on the football field. And and I'm sure Ron can tell you this, no football player wants to step on that field second guessing themselves about what they're about to do.
That is true. I'll make a comment to that because I remember having my first concussion, but it wasn't called a concussion. I really literally ran into a guy and basically was out. I got up and went to the other team's bench and sit down.
Oh.
This was in the first half. And I came back out the second half and finished the game. But I took a couple of aspirins and, you know, and kept playing the game. And I know without a doubt, you know, like I never encouraged my son to play football. If he wanted to play, I would be right there with him. But I have never encouraged him to play football. Even the young kids that I work with day in and day out, I just don't encourage the game because I know exactly what it has done to my body. You know, I mean, I've had back surgery, knee surgery, finger surgery, and I'm in constant pain. It's just been one of those things that, you know, I'm kind of glad I did it because I had a great experience, but the pain that I feel from it, it's terrible, honestly.
I have a question for Ron. I'd love to ask him. So Ron, one of the things, you know, we did in the film is we featured this this Pee Wee football team from Chicago. It's a Pee Wee team that comes from a tough neighborhood, and the coach there, who I liked a lot, he talks about the values that he thinks the kids get from playing football. That even kids from rival neighborhoods now look at each other differently because they've been on this team together and sort of bled together, if you will, even at that young age. And then, of course, the mom of one of the kids talks about how, she realizes there are dangers with playing football, but she feels like there's so many dangers in the neighborhood and dangerous temptations in the neighborhood, that she feels like this is certainly a much better alternative. What do you say to parents or people who say, if we were to take away football, it would really have a profound impact in tough, poor, African American neighborhoods?
Well, just answering that and speaking from my own experience, football for me was my way out. I mean, it was the driving force behind everything that I did. I knew it was a violent, tough game, and I was one of the littlest guys out there. And some of those guys that come from that area, those areas right there, they know without a doubt the only way that they are possibly going to get out is football. And I know without a doubt I never would have left Memphis without football. It was the reason I was able to come to Tennessee State and play football was because of my skills that I possessed from a little age, from a young guy all the way up. So it's hard to convince a parent to take that kid out when you know without a doubt that's keeping that kid occupied, that's keeping his mind working, that's keeping him thinking, although at the same time it doesn't really help a whole lot, with some of the things that are going on in the neighborhood because all the kids don't play.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you come up, please? Got another question?
Thanks for joining us. I'm a huge fan of your work. Really appreciate your films. I have something maybe more related to the film itself. I wonder how you came to get involved with the project, and then also maybe where you met the most resistance in filming this throughout your time before it wrapped.
Well, I think I got involved because I was paying attention to this issue as someone who follows sports, and I'm a Bears fan here in Chicago. You can't live in Chicago and not be a Bears fan. That's sacrilegious. And so the opportunity presented itself to me when one of the executive producers on the film had optioned Chris Nowinski's book Head Games, and got it to me and said, would you be interested in doing a film on the sports concussion crisis, and in particular maybe using this book as a foundation for it. And so I was kind of ripe and ready to want to do something on the subject because of my own curiosities and concerns. And so I read Chris's book. I was really impressed with it. And initially I think we were going to make the film more about football, because that's what his book is mostly about. But once we got into it, I kind of realized that, I think the real value of this film could be to not just tell the story of how it became an issue with the NFL and the fight that Chris waged, but to really move on and deal with other sports as well, because they don't get enough attention, particularly at the amateur level. Even football at the amateur level doesn't get enough attention in the media. So it evolved. And in terms of resistance, we didn't meet a lot of resistance. I mean, there are professional athletes who didn't want to be in the film if they were active. And there were professional athletes whose stories, like, I think I can say it now, Jim McMahon, the former Bears quarterback who was just on the cover of Sports Illustrated posing with his girlfriend who's suffering a lot of problems. And we tried to get Jim McMahon involved, and I don't think he was ready to be public about it at that time. He has since become more public about it, clearly. So we ran into a little bit of resistance in that way. And then we ran into some resistance from the NFL when we tried to get their cooperation. I wanted to interview Roger Goodell, and I tried repeatedly to get them to give me an interview with him, but that just wasn't going to happen.
Steve, I hate to do it, but I'm just getting the warning that we have to leave the theater. I wish we could talk longer, but thank you so much for being here. I look forward to seeing your Roger Ebert documentary that you're working on. I think 2014 is when we can expect that. Is that right?
I don't know. We'll
Okay,
see.
we'll see. Okay, well, good luck with it anyway. Thanks so
Thanks,
much for
Steve.
being here. Yeah.
Thank you so
See
much
ya.
for
Thank
having
you,
me.
Ron Johnson. And also, I wanted to mention that the Tennessean is running a piece about concussions this Sunday. Nate R.E.A.L wrote a piece about this film, and Steve James tonight, and they've been working on a longer project about youth sports in Tennessee and concussions. So check that out too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.